Uh, Good evening, everybody. Today is Wednesday, March 25th, 2026. Time is 6 p.m. We do have a quorum present, so I'd like to call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the Chittenden Solid Waste District. The agenda and the meeting packet was released late last week. And trust that you've all had a chance to go through the packet and look at the agenda. The first item on the agenda is the agenda itself. Are there any requests for changes or additions to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll follow the agenda as presented in the board packet. Item number 2 on the agenda is the public comment period. I can state for the record, there are no members of the public present in the CSWD meeting room. Are there any members of the public present via Zoom or phone who wish to address the Board of Commissioners?
There are no members.
There are no members of the public on Zoom.
Thank you very much. Therefore, I'll close the public comment period. And we'll move quickly then on to the consent agenda, which consists of the minutes of the February 25th and March 10th, 2026 meetings of the Board of Commissioners with standard program update memos, our finance report, standard finance report, and the executive director update. Are there any requests to remove an item from the consent agenda? Margie, your hand's up?
Yeah, I had a different memory of a piece of the minutes of February 25th, sorry, 2026.
It's substantive.
I think so.
Okay, so let's pull that from the consent agenda. This is the February 25th.
Correct.
Okay. Any other requests to remove an item from the consent agenda? I think I'm going to go ahead and ask for the executive director update to be repulled because I just have a question and I just want to highlight a few things from that. Any other requests? All right, so we're going to pull the February 25th, 2026 minutes and the executive director update from the consent agenda. Without objection, then the remaining items in the consent agenda will be accepted as presented in the board packet. Mari, I'll let you go ahead first with your question about the minutes.
Yeah, my question had to do with the NetSuite issue, which I think is on page 4 of the packet, and it had to do with a question I asked. My question, I think, was whether or not the change to Excel from using NetSuite for certain activities was taking extra time for staff. And the answer that I understood was that using Excel actually saves staff time, not, in other words, the change from NetSuite to Excel for certain processes was a good thing.
John is nodding his head in agreement with that. So I don't have the minutes in front of me, are the minutes misstating that fact?
Well, this is what the minutes state. Answering a question from M. Wiener, J. Valparda said that NetSuite saves staff a considerable amount of time. So I think what I understood was that not using NetSuite and changing to Excel for certain processes saves staff a considerable amount of time. But I'm willing to be corrected, but that's what I heard.
Remember
No,
that.
that is correct.
Okay, so
Using Excel has saved us a lot of time, particularly with the budgeting process.
that's an important change to make to the minutes. I trust that will be made.
Yeah, I can't find it.
Oh, it's on page 4 of the packet. It's under consent agenda. There's a B, and that's the discussion about NetSuite. It's above Murph Financials, below. It's in the middle of a page, kind of.
Yes, yeah. It's the very last.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's the very last sentence of that paragraph.
It should just actually read that using Excel saves staff a considerable amount of time.
Rather than NetSuite.
Okay.
Thanks
Thank you.
thanks for detecting that, Marty.
I didn't see it. I read right over that and thought nothing of it.
My questions were for the executive director update, really to call attention to a couple of things there. One, just to acknowledge the impending, or the announcement of retirement of Jen Holliday, effective June 30th. There would be time to reflect on her retirement, but I think this is an important, I'm not sure if milestone is the right thing, but an important step or event in the history of CSWD.
Certainly an important event, yes,
And
yes.
so,
Though I would argue that hiring Jen in the first place was the first important event for CSWD. And yes, thank you for pulling this out so that we could properly acknowledge Jen in public and for the record. And I think we really can't overstate Jen's impact, not just on solid waste management in the state of Vermont, but really her impact on a national basis, particularly with extended producer responsibility laws. Jen was in on the ground floor of discussions with many of these and has served as, a guide for a lot of states. She is well known nationally for her work here. And Vermont has certainly benefited from all of her activities and just the depth of her knowledge. And so yes, I thank you for pulling that, for wanting to acknowledge Jen and to say thank you for everything that you've done in the last 35 years. Thank
I
you.
hope we'll have more opportunities between now and the end of June to reinforce that acknowledgement and those thanks. I also wanted to remind commissioners on commissioner email. I think now more than ever vitally important that if at all possible, you use your CSWD emails for all communications dealing with CSWD issues. This is not only a security issue to make sure, at least I believe, that we can make sure that those emails are monitored or administered
It makes it easier.
appropriately,
Yeah, it
properly.
makes it easier to basically to sort through messages if we need to, and to make sure that we're collecting business related emails in one location. So it just makes it easier to collate and to sort. And if you're, I understand that it's another email account to manage, but if you could, in the very least, CC your cswd.net email, that will also pull that message into the system. So you may notice that when I respond back to you, if you've sent me something from your personal email, I remember CC your CSWD email, just to kind of keep that in the thread. So, but ideally you're using your commissioner emails, but in the very least, just CC your personal CSWD email as well.
Thank you very much. And the last item, I wanted to just ask you a little bit more to expand on the City of Burlington recycling and the awarding of the contract to Casella. I saw this in the press, and my immediate question is, what are the ramifications for CSWD? And I think just if you could expand on that, please.
Yeah, so this has been something that's been in the works. Sorry that I don't see Lee here, but it's been in the works with the city for many, many, many years, just talking about ways to certainly improve their services, but also more recently, ways to kind of rein in some of the costs. The city has been providing recycling service to residents for a very, very long time. And they've been looking at consolidated collection. We were helping them and the city of South Burlington look at those programs. And Burlington decided to start with seeing if there was an appetite for consolidated collection just of the recycling service. So they put that out to bid. Only one respondent replied to the RFP, and it was Casella. So they decided to do a comparison between Casella's offer and the cost to the city, and it appeared that it was less expensive for the city to award the contract to Casella and consolidate their services that way. So it's kind of the first step, perhaps, to overall consolidated collection. But part of the resolution to award the contract was to establish a study commission to look into full implementation of consolidated collection by the end of the contract term. So CSWD has been asked to participate in that and have a seat on that committee, which we're happy to do. So that should be getting underway within the next year. It'll take a while to gather all the information and then to do the stakeholder work and the community work. So that will be underway as well. As far as the materials, it is in the contract with Casella that all recycling collected from, as a result of this contract, must be brought to our materials recycling facility for processing. And we'll make sure that when the address changes, that there's an amendment to the contract to reference that. Actually, I may even just ask Lee to say, make sure that as you're finalizing the documents, to add the new address of the new facility as well, so that it's a seamless transition when that occurs. So as far as the impact to CSWD, there's nothing negative at all for us. It could also, I think, help provide us some interesting data because we'll have very solid residential numbers from the city of Burlington. So that should be interesting. To be, I think, determined and worked out is how our drop-off center continues to relate to the city's program. We've been trying to get a meeting on the calendar with Lee and Chapin. They've been pretty busy, but to kind of talk that through, because we do obviously accept recycling at our drop-off center, and to talk through some of that. So that is the one piece that is still a bit up in the air as to how that might affect our drop-off center. But as far as our MRF, there's no negative effect whatsoever.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Sarah on her executive director report, other than what I have posed to her? Then I think we need a motion to accept the minutes of the February 25th, 2026 board meeting and the executive director's report.
So moved, South Burlington.
Second, Jericho.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we accept the minutes of February 25th.
As amended.
The minutes as amended.
As amended, thank you very much, yes. Minutes as amended and the executive director update. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Any
I abstain. This is Barb. I abstain because I wasn't there.
Let me see, we don't need a roll call for this with an abstention, if there was a.
Just note the abstention, and note the abstention.
Noting the abstention, okay, very good. So then those two items are accepted from the consent agenda. Thank you very much. Just by way of explanation, if we have a vote, because we're a hybrid in person and via Zoom, if there is a vote that is taken that is not done unanimously, we have to do a roll call vote. That's the reason for me just asking for clarification. In this case, it was an abstention, and we can proceed without doing a roll call vote. We're now ready to move on to item number 4, which is the Materials Recovery Facility Project Update. I'll turn it over to Sarah, and then I may have a few comments to make as well. Go ahead.
So we have a couple of items, 3 items really to talk about with the MRF. So there are 2 potential change orders. So those are for action. We'll get to those after the update on the fraud incident. So just want to again keep the board informed as to kind of what's been going on. We continue to meet with federal authorities. It really has gone to the federal piece. The local and state are not really acting as active, I guess we would say. It really has gone to the federal level, so we continue to support their activities and efforts. Of course, we are reviewing all of our financial policies and procedures. We expect to have some suggestions for revisions to at least one financial policy. We'll bring that to the Finance Committee for review, and then it will go to the full board for discussion, review, and hopefully approval. So we will be bringing those, I think likely, John, by the May meeting should be ready for that. Again, it shouldn't be much to review, but we want to make sure that we've been thorough in that. We are also going to be looking into, so we're also revising our fiscal '27 budget forecast. That work is being completed by staff this week and again bringing to the Finance Committee for their review. That meeting is the 7th.
April 7th.
So, yes, 5:30. So we'll be bringing that to review to the Finance Committee. And then with the aim of bringing the budget to the full board in the April meeting. We are also reviewing remaining projects and intended expenses for fiscal '26. So we're looking at our anticipated spend for fourth quarter and just making some adjustments where it looks to be appropriate. And so we'll be also reviewing that with the Finance Committee too, just so that we have a full total of the cuts and or savings across the remaining quarter and into next fiscal year. John and I are meeting with our bank this week to discuss options for a bridge loan, a short-term loan, if that proves necessary. So we're gonna have some options there to review also with Finance Committee. So it'll be a busy meeting on the 7th, but that's good. We've talked with Thomas and understand the parameters that under which we can do a short-term borrow. So that is also happening this week. What else? You'd wanted to move
I'm gonna bring up a couple of things.
Okay. Yeah, why
Do that and
you
then
can
we'll open up for
identify-
questions
Yeah, sounds
on
good.
this topic for Sarah. I just wanted to call to the board's attention and for the public's benefit. At the executive board meeting that we had on Monday, March 16th, we did discuss in open session some of the aspects of the Murph incident. And I just wanted to call attention for the benefit of the board and again, the public, at least one series of questions about immediate changes in procedures, not long-term changes, but just to get that into the record because I think it's beneficial. So I'm gonna read verbatim from this raw, unapproved version of those board meeting minutes that P. Roos asked for a review of changes that have been made to the standard operating procedures because of this incident. S. Reeves said that the main change is not to initiate any new ACH transfers. Answering a question from K. Spencer, S. Reeves said that any changes in ACH will be verified by the contract manager, and I believe that's a staff person managing the contract. The contract manager will then verify every change with 2 organizational contacts. I would believe that would be the other party involved in the contract. Answering a question from P. Roos, S. Reeves said that Simple Route did a full review of the network and affected accounts, which showed that there was no indication of malware or other breach. Simple Route has also recommended several system changes to improve security. I take it that's going to be taken under advisement.
Yeah.
Again, I just think that that's important to share with the board for your information. I also want to update you, made it clear that the board will be conducting its own independent investigation. And I've been having conversations with Steve Ellis of Paul Frank & Collins, who's acting as the board's attorney in this matter, representing the board's interest, not necessarily the staff's interest or the rest of the organization. And he is working hard to identify a firm that will conduct a focused, independent, and defensible investigation into CSWD's suspected business email compromise. The goal will be the determination of the scope, the root cause, the impact, and the appropriate remediation of this business email compromise. If it turns out to be not a business email compromise, but something else, I'm sure that would be uncovered and they would be making their report and recommendations on that as well. I am expecting that we'll be able to identify a firm very shortly and get that process going as soon as possible. But in the meantime, it's important to the integrity of the investigation that information developed to date is not shared with anyone but counsel and the investigators who will be engaged by counsel. So I have been in receipt of some information that I have forwarded on to Steve Ellis, and it has gone no further than that, and I will not be releasing any information until instructed by counsel that it's appropriate for the integrity of the investigation, protection of the interests of everybody involved, every party, staff, CSWD, counterparties, everybody. We want to get this thing right and not needlessly speculate or cause any undue harm to any party until that's done. So that's kind of my speech about where we're at. In a minute, we'll talk about the change orders, but I'd open it up for any questions, what you've heard so far about the MRF situation. Leslie?
I had one question. In the course of an audit, the auditors typically review internal controls and provide a memo to that effect. Could that be from the last audit? Could that internal controls memo and or recommendations from the auditors be shared with the board?
Sure, we always include the audit in board packets.
No, but
so-
the internal controls memo is not necessarily part of the audit report.
Okay.
I haven't had time to go back and check on that, but often it's an internal advisory for management that isn't necessarily provided as part of the full audit report.
Certainly seems appropriate. It's a part of the oversight responsibilities of the district. So you'll make note of that, Sarah.
Yes.
Betsy, your hand is up.
Yeah, I was just wondering, based on all the media coverage, we sort of know what happened. And so, unless we don't, but I guess I'm just curious, what's the cost going to be to do an investigation, to hire a consultant, if in the end it's human error, just not noticing a hyphen in the email address, not verifying before wiring the money? I'm just wondering how much it's going to cost and if we're going to learn anything maybe that we don't already know.
I guess I can answer that. One is that it's too early to know what the cost is, but I'd use the term trust but verify. You know, we've heard, or we may hear, we'll hear from all the different parties stating what they did. They may be expressing that in good faith, but that may not be the whole story. There may be reasons why they are unable to provide the full information. I think that the board, in its oversight responsibility and capacity, really needs to get an independent, objective evaluation. It's part of our responsibility to our constituents and the public. I wouldn't just want to take anybody's word for it in a case where $3 million has gone missing. I don't know if Thomas, you could add anything to that?
I think that's it. A question was posed by a commissioner at a prior meeting about what's the board's liability. And you know, to the extent that something happened and you did not investigate and it happens again, then there is potential liability. It's fulfilling your fiduciary duty as a member of the board governing body of dealing with basically public funds. And as the chair had indicated, it's a trust but verify. In my many years of serving as counsel to the district, I have not seen anything from whether it's staff or even the board that would suggest improper conduct. But that's my impression, that's my experience. I still think it's valuable to the board and to the organization to have that objective, independent, outside review, just to verify that it wasn't an intentional fraud, or that there wasn't some other intentional bad actors that were coming in and infiltrating the district. And I appreciate that it's an expense, and particularly when you have a financial hit, but I do think that it is worthwhile for the board to have that independent verification, or not, or to have the independent investigation.
Leslie, your hand was.
Well, Katie had her hand up
Oh,
first.
I'm sorry, Katie, go ahead, and then Leslie.
Hey, just a quick question. So did you say that the federal, there's still a federal investigation going on? Or did you say you're not I know you mentioned that, but I didn't know if you were saying that they haven't taken any action yet and you're hoping they will, or they are in the process of taking action and we don't have any updates?
So at this point, really the only organization we're cooperating with is the FBI, and they're considering it an active investigation.
You're good, Katie, with your question. Leslie, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, as a board member, I think, from my point of view, and maybe this is outside board responsibility, in which case I defer to Thomas's opinion, but even if there is no finding of intentional fraud on the part of any actor inside the district, we're about to engage in a huge new undertaking with this new MRF, which has lots of management ramifications, because we're scaling up in a way that is material, in my opinion. And I feel that the board needs a level of confidence that we've got our management ducks in a row to deal with the operational challenges of this larger scale. And this rather serious potential oversight or failure of systems or whatever it turns out to be, assuming it was not intentional inside the district, we need to learn those lessons to assure that management has the tools and the adequate staff and appropriate staff to manage the scaling up of the MRF operations. And that was something that I feel, the board has a responsibility to assure that it is indeed becomes an operational success.
I take your comments to be in support of doing an independent, objective investigation.
Yeah, absolutely, yes, but
And-
also by way of sort of responding to Betsy's perspective, I'm trying to put this onto a broader platform, because to me it raises many other issues above and beyond the specific incident.
Paul, to clarify that, it didn't sound from what your description of the scope might be, that the investigation would touch on what Leslie is talking about.
No, you're misunderstanding what I'm
No,
trying to say.
I wanna make sure that that's clear, that you're talking
Yeah.
about something
No.
completely different.
Right,
Okay,
yes.
Yep.
But this is the first step I'm saying this is the first step that the board needs, because the incident raises these other questions that the board may wish to address. Okay.
I appreciate your comment. I'm one among many, but I would agree with you that that's an important feature, function of, or a hoped for outcome of this investigation. Other discussion on where we're at so far with the MRF, and again, this is really talking about the incident and actions that have been taken and are being taken. Well, I think then we'll move to the second part of this MRF discussion, which are change order requests that are in part of the board packet, and I'll turn it over to you, Sarah, I guess, to Josh isn't here. Or Josh is here, but
Josh is online, so I'm going to turn it to Josh to answer any particular and specific questions regarding the two potential change orders. And they're fairly straightforward, but Josh, I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to point out or.
No, I guess just for the first change order, which looks like a really big number, almost $500,000, just acknowledging that the difference is still a pretty big change over the original estimate, but it comes after a lot of conversations with multiple players as we've gone through the design process. So originally it was carried as an allowance by REARC when they were first estimating the cost of the building and bidding on the project. And then as we had conversations, particularly with the fire department and with the Department of Fire Safety, they had some concerns about smoke evacuation from the building, given the historical issues and fire events that we've had, and issues with evacuating smoke from the building and actually resulting in having to cut holes in the side of our building. So that necessitated the increase in duct size, which obviously increased the scope of the HVAC system, which is why the number is significantly bigger than originally allowed. But obviously, they were still carrying a large number at the outset of the bidding of the project. So just providing a little more context to the first one, since it is a lot bigger of a number.
Okay, we're going to take these one at a time. Bryn, your hand is up. You have a question?
Yeah, I'm curious if there's definitely a lot to this that I'm not aware of. Many conversations that have led up to that recommendation. I'm curious how the engineer sizing the equipment responded to that request or recommendation from fire officials.
So the original design, where the allowance was the 200,000+, that HVAC was strictly for environmental air makeup for the building, essentially for staff working in the building. When we started having conversations with fire safety and the fire department, the next iteration of design that came out conformed with an NFPA standard that requires 2 air exchanges an hour for particular building types. And so the next iteration, the cost estimate was essentially, $1 million+ because of how big the duct size had to be to accommodate 2 air exchanges in such a large building in 2 hours. When we went back to the Department of Fire Safety, they acknowledged that our building type wasn't what that had originally been spec'd, which allowed us to essentially design for 1 air exchange an hour, which allowed us to drop the size of the ductwork back down again. So it's a roundabout way of saying the engineers originally spec'd for essentially environmental air makeup. Then they had to revert back to what they thought was sort of an over-engineered design. And then we were able to meet back in the middle after further conversations.
Yeah, I was gonna have a follow-up question. It's like, did the standards change in the timeline since spec'ing to today? Because that could make sense. Just curious on, especially on the engineer side of things, of like equipment sizing, and are the controls going to be able to be set up for the building so they're energy efficient, or are the standards basically requiring oversizing the equipment and essentially locking us into higher energy demand prices because of that oversized equipment?
Yeah, I think originally, or the second iteration, the engineers thought we were locked into a certain specification, and upon further conversation, realized we had a little more flexibility, but we still wanted to obviously work with the Department of Fire Safety and the Williston Fire Department on coming up with a sort of compromise situation where we weren't having to put in unnecessary equipment to allow for smoke evacuation, given that the frequency of events where we need that equipment is hopefully very infrequent, but also allowing them to have the best opportunity to do their work when need be. So it was sort of that in between. We weren't locked into something, but we wanted to still make all parties happy, which is why we landed on kind of this medium sizing for the ductwork.
Great.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's helpful. Obviously standards are always improving and evolving, and want to make sure that CSWD is very clearly meeting those. It was I think a question of like, required versus recommended. And
Sure.
so I appreciate the extra detail there. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yep.
Well, there is a motion in the packet. Let's get that out on the floor, and then we can still have further discussion if need be.
Be it resolved that the CSWD Board of Commissioners hereby approves the district's executive director to execute PCO number 008 with Rearc Construction Company in the amount of $485,586.20 for HVAC construction costs.
So move South Burlington.
Second,
Second,
Jerome.
Essex.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we authorize this change order with Rearc Construction in the amount of $485,586.20. Betsy, your hand is up. Go ahead.
Yes, it sounds like for this one, there was an allowance that was set aside. Does that cover the full amount, or are we having to, is some of this outside of the original allowance amount?
The original allowance is listed in the memo. So it's essentially, it's replacing the original allowance amount, which
Josh,
was,
I don't think it's in the memo.
oh, it didn't make it to the memo. The original allowance was, off the top of my head, it was like 220,000. So it's the delta between what you all just approved and what the original allowance was, which will be what will be added to the original building estimate. But given that it's a final, an actual bid from a subcontractor, we need to approve the full amount as the change order.
So were there contingency funds to make up the delta?
I mean,
I
yes,
don't know that I
understand. We always have a contingency amount built into the overall building estimate. This is the result of, again, a bit of re-engineering away from the original design, which was, as Josh was saying, the result of looking at a different fire suppression system and lots of this was months of back and forth with the fire officials and the engineers, and CSWD and Rearc kind of pushing back quite a bit on not over-engineering for this particular component. But this does represent the actual cost according to kind of the compromise versus the original allowance was like a pre-engineered, pre-design estimate. So this is the reality. And as Josh was saying, it's about 50% less than what the engineers had come back with as the super engineered part. So Josh, this is the 45.5 is that on top of the 225, or is this the total?
No, that's the total amount. So the delta between the original estimate and this number is what will actually be the overage from the original building estimate.
So this is representing the new cost for the HVAC. So
Correct.
that's the total. Yeah.
Correct.
So the delta is in the range of $250,000.
Yeah, somewhere in that range. Yeah.
Okay, I just remember at a previous board meeting, it might have been Leslie who said all these change orders are kind of adding up, and like, what's the total cost? And are we within budget still? So I was just trying to get a handle on that, because between the two change orders you're asking us to approve tonight, I mean, it's over $500,000, so.
Right. And what we don't bring to you, which we probably should, are some of the change orders that go in the other direction. They're not nearly as dramatic as this, but there are change orders that come in under, because again, like as the bids come back from the subcontractors, those are the real charges. So where the project estimate was just that, now that we're kind of into it, is the refinement, and particularly when we get like an estimate for the actual work, REARC still goes back and negotiates, and, we'll push back and say, this maybe isn't exactly what we need, or this is too much. And so we've been doing an awful lot of that. Josh and Kaylee spend a tremendous amount of time managing that estimate and that expectation. And REARC has been great at working with subs and making sure they're aware this is a municipal project and there's not fluff here. But this does represent, the actual versus that initial construction estimate. But we are still within that contingency, I believe, but we should verify that, Josh, and we can get a rundown of the change orders and kind of their plus and minus the net.
Yeah, and Kaylee, and John are tracking, to date costs and specifically, Kaylee's looking at I think it was originally when we did the re-estimate of the building, I think we added a 10% contingency when we got the new estimate. And so she's monitoring where we are in relation to that ultimate 10% contingency on the overall cost, and monitoring that very closely. So we can get a status update on that number for the next board meeting if that's helpful.
It is. Leslie?
So I want to tie Josh's comment back to Beth's mentioning my previous comment. What I'm finding very frustrating is that first of all, let me say I will support these change orders. I don't think there's any choice. We have a bid. We have to go forward. I'm in support of it, but there are many moving parts, both in costs and revenue projections, which are also changing when we look at our at the flow of MRF materials, which is not meeting our expectations. So there are revenue, potential forecast changes in revenue and forecast changes in costs. And we need to see a reset of the cash flow projections on this project, which rather than, this little piece and that little piece, we needed to see it all tied together so that we have some confidence in where we're going. And of course, it's compounded by the financing questions, which have to be wrapped in as well into that a revised cash flow forecast. And I'd like to feel confident that this is on a work agenda. And when are we gonna see it?
Well, we did present it.
No, but now we've had more changes since.
Okay, but I wanna remind the board that we did present exactly this. You were not at that meeting, I don't think, Leslie. Just looking back, oh no, you were there. In February.
Yes, but I know, but now we're looking at another 500,000, and that's what I'm saying, Sarah.
Okay.
And we have more information about the MRF material, the tonnage, recycling tonnage of materials which are trending below forecast. So, presumably there has to be some kind of contingency estimate on the revenue forecast. And we want to see that it all works out. And
John and I will work on that.
Huh?
He and I will work on that.
Thank you. That's my request.
I will try to.
I just don't feel that.
So we'll.
I know it's challenging and it's hard, but every month or every 2 weeks, there's new information.
And that's the challenge, right?
Yeah,
That's the
sure.
challenge. So we will come up with something that will be easy to update and easy and still of the moment, right? As much as it can be, because these things do change. There's no way for us to accurately forecast a year from now as far as the ACR, the average commodity rate, right?
Oh, yeah, that's understood.
The world is what it is.
It's in turmoil.
It's a little turmoilish. So,
You could say.
you know, well, we can certainly do, like we've been doing for a while, the range, right? Here's what it looks like at X dollar, and then here's at Rosie. We can revisit that and produce that. That's the future. That's the new MRF. I think it's two separate things, right? It's how's the project going, and it's what does the cash look like and the flow look like for the new facility. So, but we can do both. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we'll work on.
Further compounded by the complication that we got bids back for the operating contract, and we're going to be getting bids back for the marketing contract, and so that throws a wrinkle into cash flow, obviously, when the new MRF starts up too. So
We didn't, it didn't make any sense to guess on that until we had some of these hard numbers, which we talked about.
Well,
in
that's good information.
in
Those are
February.
coming in and you can feed that into your model.
Right, which we did talk about, I believe, last month and in January. But again, now that we have some of these harder numbers, we'll be able to be more confident in the projections. So it didn't make a ton of sense to give a projection that was still squishy. It's a little less squishy now.
I'd like to return back to the issue of the motion that's before us on this change order. Is there further discussion on the proposed change order? Again, just to be clear, what I heard is that the amount of $485,586 is modified by the fact that there was an allowance and doesn't represent a full additional cost of $486,000.
Correct.
We don't have a hard number, but it's in the 250 range is I believe I heard in the impact of this change order.
Yes.
Further discussion on the motion to approve this resolution to authorize authorizes the executive director to execute a change order with Rearc Construction for $485,586.20. There being no discussion, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say
Aye.
nay. Are any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you very much. Move on then to the second change order.
yeah, this one is also very this one's more straightforward. I think we dug a pit. There was clay at the bottom of the pit, and we had to excavate the clay and add some stone, and needless to say, it was a big pit, so it cost a lot of money. And that was sort of an unexpected cost, given that we hadn't been able to sort of take a look at the entire site, as deep as we would have liked to. So this is one unexpected. SD Ireland has completed the work, so this is on us to, they floated that cost to us, which we appreciate, to keep the project moving. And so this is making up for that work.
And again, when we obviously dug a series of test pits to get a sense for the soil condition way back when, but you can only dig so many. So this particular one happened to be in a location, and it's a very large site, and happened to be in a location, the site that had more clay than the other areas that had less clay and were mostly sand. So it just, maybe it's the way we had to rotate the building, who knows? But this is why this one was unexpected, even though we did do the initial survey work and investigation work and test pits where it's probably about a dozen or more test pits, and we just didn't hit the one with the clay.
So why don't we get the motion then on the floor, please?
Sure. Be it resolved that the CSWD Board of Commissioners hereby approves the district's executive director to execute PCO number 011 in the amount of $76,127.70 for purposes of reimbursing REARC and SD Ireland for additional costs due to unforeseen below-grade conditions.
So moved, Jericho.
Second, South Burlington.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. The motion to approve a change order in the amount of $76,127.70. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Abstentions? The motion carries. The change order is approved.
Thank you.
We're now ready to move on to item number 5, which is the drop-off center survey, the preliminary results. This is very interesting information. Is it Jen who's going to walk us through this?
I will start by introducing you to Michael Mosier from the Center for Rural Study at UVM. Michael, some of you were here about a year ago, he presented on our household survey. And we've asked him to do another survey that's aimed at specifically drop-off centers, the public, and trying to gain knowledge about how to get new customers at our drop-off centers. So trying to understand why people use our drop-off centers, why they don't use them, and how we might our marketing efforts towards getting more. So I'm gonna try to do it this way.
Thanks. So some of you have heard this before, at least 2 of you in the room, and some of you might have seen me before when I was here a couple of years ago. As Jen mentioned, this is a very sort of narrow slice of a study that we did, just focused on drop-off centers and how to get folks, understand their motivators for using or not using those drop-off centers. We co-developed an accessible, actually CSWD did all the work, most of the work on developing the instrument. I helped a little bit, but you knew the questions that you wanted to ask. And developed that instrument. It includes some quantitative and qualitative responses. So there's like the sort of the numeric stuff, and then there's some more in-depth detail as to sort of some of the motivations behind some of those responses. We did this in February, reached out to Chittenden County residents, had about 420 respondents with a margin of error of about 4.8%. Some, just a sampling of some of the demographics. 80% of respondents live with family members, 1 or more family members. 17% live alone, and 4% live, I know the numbers don't add up, there's rounding going on here. There's 4% that live with non-family, so maybe renter households or, and we do know who the renters are as well. 97% of respondents were homeowners, 3% renters. That's skewed, obviously, and I don't have an answer as to why that's skewed. And then we asked this gender question, what's the gender of the person who makes decisions about your household trash, and found that it's about 50-50, which I don't know, I would have made some different assumptions, but that's on me, so now we know. Here we're just showing the respondents across different towns in Chittenden County and the census percentages. Beals Gore, I believe someone lives there. I think it's up to like 12 people. Anyway, it didn't show up in the census because it's too small a number, but you actually had some respondents from Beals Gore. And you could see that these rates are comparable to the census population. So you've got good representation from around Chittenden County, essentially. Just some sort of the top level findings. That first point is really nice. 97% of respondents were aware that there are local drop-off centers in the area. So that's really great. Good for you. You've got good branding and you're good outreach. Only a third of respondents take their trash to the drop-off center. And you've got about half, if you look at that top line, household curbside collection every week, and then the third line down, curbside collection every other week. That's about half of respondents are doing curbside collection. You know, you've got 14% of, just about 14% that say they've got a dumpster or bin provided by a landlord or condo association. And then some folks are creative with what they do with their trash, which, you know, there's all, no one admitted to throwing it over the bank, which was nice, but I think, you know, folks take it to their work dumpster. That's one of the more common responses we see, or to the neighbor's house. People are actually putting it in their friends or relatives' bins because they're not going very often, so they'll just throw a bag in there, and let's assume they have an arrangement for that. This is just sort of the usage of the different drop-off centers for folks that do take it. And as I mentioned earlier today, this probably has a lot to do with the population centers. It's relative, and I guess matches what you're seeing at those centers. So, yeah. So this is one of those qualitative questions where we asked, what's the main reason your household brings trash to a drop-off center instead of using curbside? The majority of respondents mentioned some aspect of affordability. They said that, you know, and a lot of those folks, about 24 of those folks said that they just don't generate enough trash to pay for, to justify paying for weekly or bi-weekly pickup costs. You know, they said, you know, my bin is empty every other week. Even, you know, I might put one bag of trash in there. It just doesn't make sense for me to do it. 20 respondents said it was really convenient to go to the drop-off center, whether that's and convenience could mean a lot of things. It could be that it's close by. It could also be that it's, you know, they're bringing mixed trash, like maybe batteries and whatever, recycling, whatever. And you know, the details are in the actual open responses, which we have, the full list of those. I just collapsed all of this a little bit for this purpose. And then you have, you know, a much smaller number of respondents that said they were, you know, had dissatisfaction with their hauler or just dealing with the bins and their driveway. A couple people said they had really long driveways, I seem to recall, and dragging them up and down was not high on their list of things to do. And then 6 respondents said that they enjoy going to the drop-off center. They enjoy the people at the drop-off centers. I'm one of those people. I enjoy going when I can, and that there's a little bit of a, you know, social activity. I think one person said it's the one time I get out of the house per week, which that's interesting. And yeah, and then some folks said they just really like the control of doing it themselves. And likewise, we asked, what are the top reasons your household does not bring trash to the drop-off center? We didn't give them the open response option. We gave them a bunch of, you know, options to list with an other option as well. No one said that they didn't know drop-off centers existed, that 0.0 near the bottom there. So that's nice. But 40% again mentioned convenience being for curbside collection as their primary reason for not using the drop-off center. About 20% of folks said they don't like to put trash in their vehicle. 15% said they don't have time to go to the drop-off. That might also be convenience, right? Actually, putting trash in the vehicle is a convenience issue as well, probably. So, you know, being able to roll a bin out to the curb, assuming you don't have a 800-foot long driveway, it's pretty convenient, I suppose. Yeah. We have a hand. I could take questions now.
Go ahead, Bryn.
Yeah, just quick clarifying question, and hello, we worked together quite a while when I was at the state, so nice to see you
Hi,
again.
Bryn.
Nice to have our
Good to
paths
see you
crossed.
again.
Yeah. I was curious if anybody mentioned any mobility challenges as a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it may not be captured here specifically, but it is captured in a couple different places. I recall seeing comments about, people just saying it's, I'm too old to do this. I'm too old to both roll the bin and also too old to throw the bag of trash in my car and deal with bins in and out of a car. So it's happening in both ways, in both as factors in both ways there.
Yeah. Come here.
And
Leslie,
was that, Jen, was the part of the questionnaire including age ranges? I might not have made it into the slide deck, but was that part of the demographic information collected as well?
Yep, absolutely. So we do have ages, yep.
Oh, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Leslie, did I see your hand start to go up?
Yeah, just the previous slide covered only about a quarter of respondents.
Mhm.
I guess that's because only 30%, that's a reflection of 30% actually using drop-off centers. I'm trying to square that with, if you add those up, it's around maybe just over a quarter of your 415 respondents.
Yeah, there's some, those are not exact numbers. It's qualitative responses that I sort of subjectively
I know, but it's
threw
an
them
order of
into-
magnitude thing.
Yep,
And all I'm saying is, you had 400, so I'm guessing you said 30% use drop-off centers. Do I remember that from the first one?
yep.
So maybe that's why this is
Yeah.
only,
Yeah.
It is.
25. Okay, I'm just trying to get the data.
Mhm.
Okay, sorry,
No, that's good.
carry on.
Thank you. Okay, so another question that we asked was about sort of like incentivization, willingness to save or ability to save, and how much would you be paid to start using the drop-off center? And so just to be clear, respondents didn't know that when we asked them if they were, we asked them each of these questions separately. Would you be willing to go to the drop-off center if you could save $10 a month? They didn't know that they were gonna be then, that there were higher options when they chose. So right off the bat, 16% said that $10 a month would impact them enough to make the switch. And then of those that said no, they were asked, well, would $20 a month do it for you? And another, 15% said, yeah, that would do it for us. And then you get up to the $30 a month, again, that's like the folks that said no to 10 and no to 20, and maybe they're trying to ride it out and see how far they can go.
Negotiate with the survey.
Right, exactly. But 25% said $30 a month, and I don't know, maybe that aligns with some, I don't know, like bi-weekly pickup. I don't know. It's got to be more expensive than that. I have no idea. I haven't done it in years, but and then we even asked if $40 a month would do it for you, of the real hardcore folks that had said no all the way through, and you did again get some folks to switch over, but of that last after 40 we asked them well actually within the $40 question we asked would they were able to answer that no amount of savings would cause them to use the drop-off center. So it's a very small group of people that said that through this incentivization sort of process, but these are the folks that ended up saying things like, it's just too convenient for me. These are the folks that are never gonna, convenience is more important than affordability essentially. And that is a small group when you get into high numbers.
So that's 48% of what?
So I could tell you, because I tried to make it simplified, but I didn't really know how to do it very well. So it's actually 48% of about 100 people.
So 50 people
Yep.
said, out of the 400, 50 people said no amount of savings would induce them.
Yeah. They.
Okay.
Well, actually,
Not
that's
400.
not fair. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's 47 people out
The
of
ones that don't use drop-off center.
out of all that don't use drop-off centers or all that answered these questions. So it's about I'd say
70 out of 200
200.
something.
Yeah. Yep.
So a quarter.
Yep.
I'll just throw out an observation. To me, this is a marketing opportunity because I think already, if people knew what they could save by going to a drop-off center every other week as opposed to what you might be paying a hauler, that it's kind of instant savings. So if we wanted to generate more traffic.
That's exactly why we asked this question, because our speculation was a lot of people use drop-off centers because of the affordability aspect of it. I wonder if we could get other people to use drop-off centers if they knew that drop-off centers were quite affordable compared to curbside.
And then
I will say, I at least gives me a little pause in that, the board has always been very careful not to be a competitor against the private haulers so much. And so I don't know, I'm not saying one way or the other how I feel, but it's something that I wouldn't want to blindly start advertising, you can save a lot of money at the drop-off center if you come to the drop-off center without discussion at the board, because, that's been a topic in the past.
Yeah, it has, and it's been an interesting perspective to have, I mean, given that we've offered these services for 35 years. So we are competing in a way, but we also offer a lot of services that haulers don't offer or we don't want them to offer, right? So we don't want them to be handling household hazardous waste, for example, or batteries or bulbs. So part of this is, as Jen said, to understand, number one, is there recognition in general of our services? And that's great to see that most people are very aware that they're there, that we exist. We're not entirely sure if most people still understand all of the services that we offer. So it's good to see some of the comments that said, that referencing convenience as I can bring a bunch of things at one time. So there's marketing opportunities there, right? To
I
say,
agree
here, there's all these
100%.
kinds of.
If we were just to go out to try to take away customers, I would be reluctant to do that. Because the private hauler, that's a very important service that they give to our community.
And we can't compete on the convenience factor.
Well, I was gonna say, on the flip side, there's a great information here for the haulers thing.
Right.
Hammer out in your marketing message, hammer the convenience.
The convenience factor, right. We'll never be able to really compete on that.
Bryn, your hand is up?
Yeah, I think also the folks that really don't like the idea of putting trash in their car probably will continue to not want to put trash in the car. There's also a lot of cat owners in Vermont, and I know that many of them, the idea of putting kitty litter in their car is not quite a favorable idea. One final anecdote that I wanted to share is Burlington, the city of Burlington. I happened to sit in on a city council meeting of theirs, and they had instituted some requirements for any private parking lot owner to publicly and easily display their costs for parking on that site, because I think folks visiting the city were confused between whether or not it was a public lot or a private lot, and some of the costs were rather high in comparison. So in some ways I see it as like an information sharing responsibility of the municipality. So could it redirect folks to use municipal services? I mean, it may not. But I think to some extent that concept of just more publicly sharing information of what the costs are feels like a good service for CSWD to do. But yeah, I agree. A conversation for another day, Paul. So totally agree.
And we did see some comments too that point to different phases of people's lives, right? So, and we may get customers in, that we may lose them for a certain while. It may be more convenient to have curbside, and they may come back for, there's a whole host of a range of options as to why someone may or may not use our facilities. This is why doing this work is so important, so that we don't make these assumptions that, oh, well, our drop-off center customer is this only. We're seeing that that's not necessarily true, so, sorry, Michael.
Yeah, that is true. Yep, absolutely. So that, we asked people, sort of a follow-up question, why would no amount of savings cause your household to stop curbside and bring trash to the drop-off center? Again, this factor of convenience, time is convenience, right? You see time in there a bunch, you see convenience. This is just a word cloud of some of the responses, and it's a very dirty word cloud because there was a lot of text in some of those responses, but again, the more elder respondents saying that, it's just, I can't physically do it or don't physically want to do it. And I can imagine it, an icy winter morning and trying to load up a car or something like that. So, anyway, there's a lot more detail in some of the open responses in the report. We did follow up with a sort of this marketing question that we've asked in the past. What's your preferred way to receive information? We talked about this a little bit earlier, the CSWD email or newsletter. A third of folks saying that they like, that's their preferred method. There was a conversation around, well, how, that's an opt-in, so who are you reaching and who are you missing? And, I brought up the fact that there's sort of passive to active information exchange here in some of these options. There's a continuum there. And someone else brought up earlier just age again, and like your demographic, how that may influence how you like to receive information or your comfort level in different forms of communication. And so what that all leads me to think is that you probably have to keep doing it all different ways, generally. But, the text messaging is interesting to me. That's, you could do an email blast to folks. You could use your constant contact and do a lot of emailing, like, would you like to opt in kind of question to a whole list of emails. You could do that with text messaging. That might reach a slightly different demographic in a little bit different way. It's not overly intrusive if you're really holding back on the amount of that you're doing by text message, particularly. Although, as I mentioned, like, maybe wait until after November this year, maybe wait until the politics is out of the way, then you could send a text message and maybe get a response. But yeah, so there's, I'm recalling, that one of the options is at a drop-off center is fairly low, but I am recalling that when we did the focus groups around composting, a lot of people really liked that in-person conversation where they could take away maybe something to remind themselves. I think, that 15% said that they like a flyer in their mailbox. I know that's paper waste, but maybe it's something that goes on the fridge. I think people still put stuff on their refrigerators with a magnet, and if it had an easy breakdown of, what goes where and times and locations and dates, that might be interesting. So, again, lots of different options here, and but you can really tell which ones are resonating with most of these respondents anyway.
I just wanted to jump in again. I looked back at the age breakdown, and by my quick calculation here, 50% of the respondents are age 65 or older.
Yep.
You know, of retirement age, and that can explain a lot of these results. The convenience factor, and even the media. Those old folks are more familiar with newsletters and flyers in the mail than we are with text messaging or social media.
Yeah, we also talked about earlier, we talked about, you know, the renter households, the non-family, multi-person households, like how are you reaching those folks? Maybe working with landlords, management companies, because of the churn of people coming and going in Chittenden County. Maybe they're here for 2 years or 4 years or a year, whatever. So that's like sort of a continuous process. And is there an efficient way to have partnerships in place with the, you know, the RPC, the Regional Planning Commission, and or different firms that are dealing with tons of tenants? Like there may be an efficient way to have communication strategies with them as well. So, yeah, that's this was a short one. It's pretty straightforward, really focused on the drop-off centers specifically. If there's any questions or thoughts. Oh, yeah.
I had a question. I read through the different comments that people made, and it seemed like there were at least one or two people who were very angry that we would potentially suggest that everyone drive their car to a drop-off center and waste gas because that's terrible for the environment. So I was curious if anyone has perspective on how much weight that perspective holds true. You know, obviously I think about a bus analogy. Buses are better than everyone driving to wherever they need to go, but multiple haulers drive through neighborhoods. They're large vehicles. Presumably people are already out and about and maybe are driving by a drop-off center anyway.
Right.
So with perspective there, I would be curious.
Yeah, and we did have those conversations, and it kind of seems to make maybe some logical sense to folks to say, well, gee, you're putting more cars on the road. Potentially, or you're removing cars, heavy vehicles, if say you won't really only need to go once every 2 weeks or once a month. And we do know that many of our customers, particularly on Saturdays, are combining errands, they're combining trips. So they're going to the grocery store, they're going to the drop-off center, they're, you know, running to the pharmacy, they're doing multiple things. So it would be, I think, an interesting study to do. Might be a really good UVM graduate student study perhaps, or something else for someone to look into, to do that comparison, to say, okay, well, if we had, and connect it to potentially expanding consolidated collection in the district. I think if that could tell a real tale, because you're right, now every day there are multiple trash trucks and recycling trucks, composting trucks going down most streets. So what would the effect of consolidated collection be versus more folks using drop-off centers, and kind of where's the tipping point as to the climate effects? I think it'd be a really interesting study.
Bryn, your hand is up.
Sure. Sarah, it might have been before your time, but Jen, do you remember when there was the bottle bill expansion study that was done probably 10 years ago now? There was some research that DSM did around special trips versus bottle trips.
It was 2012, I believe. It was more than 10 years ago, and I thought that exact thing, Bryn, was really they were looking at, whether people take separate trips to return their beverage containers for redeeming them or not, compared to putting them in the blue bin, and that's part of an existing system, and which one produces more greenhouse gas emissions. There was a lot of arguing about that data, I believe, from stakeholders. I don't remember how it turned up. I think it was that blue bin one in that one. I think that driving your beverage containers to a redemption center would had a larger impact than the existing blue bin system.
Yeah, I think that probably was part of the systems analysis in 2013.
Yeah.
Good,
13, thank you.
good times.
Betsy, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for doing the study. The results are really interesting. I noticed in the written comments, there was a couple of, I'll say, angry notes about the gender question. And I was just curious why that question was like, why does it matter who's making the decision? And then two, if you were to do the study again, would you still include that question?
So the last question you had, Betsy, yes, we would include that question. It's about our audience and who we're speaking to and aiming to market to those folks. Sometimes different channels or social media, that kind of thing, will be more females than males. But actually, I take that back. Maybe we wouldn't, because it was a 50-50. So it actually might not really make a difference anymore, and maybe we wouldn't answer.
Yeah, it used to be traditionally a female in the household would make more of those daily household decisions. And so, but this again was, when I was doing this work, in Rhode Island maybe 15 years ago, it was a wide gap, like 75% of those in the household making the decision were the female. And so this is very interesting, seeing that it is pretty split. I agree with you, Jen. We likely don't need to, I think, ask that question now.
Yeah, it also depends on what, like if we cross-reference the survey and see that a lot of the drop-off center users were male, and what we're trying to do is get more drop-off center users, which, curbside collection, I don't know, we'd have to look at that a little bit more closely.
Yeah, we'd have to slice it up a bit.
But it's turning out not to be super important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Allison.
This is more of a comment, it's not a question, it's a comment, but I was initially struck by the statistic, I think was 18% of people who aren't using drop-off centers didn't want to do it because the trash was stinky or they didn't want to put it in their car. And my initial thought to that was, well, if you're doing it right, no, it won't smell because you don't have food in there and your recycling's clean and dry. Bryn did make the point though about cat litter, so
And
I was just thinking,
diapers and
diapers,
yeah.
in terms of education, reminding people that yes, your trash can be stinky, but sometimes it doesn't have to be, depending on your circumstances.
Yeah, ways to kind of reduce that potentially as a factor. What are some of the other things that might contribute?
I'd offer the observation, we also price at the drop-off center by container essentially, although, there's a 30-gallon or 33-gallon bag, but I put stuff in a trash can. I'm not gonna put it in the back seat of my car. And as I said, well, if I didn't have a pickup truck, I would not use a drop-off center.
Yeah.
Because I don't want the trash in my car.
And I end up using a very heavy-duty contractor bag. And I put my multiple bags into a contractor bag. It's a thicker plastic, which is, it's more plastic, but it does not leak out. Nothing gets out of that bag. But again, it's an additional expense, right? So that you have to factor that in the decision as well. It's not a one-size-fits-all. But yeah, it's all good information to try to, again, the goal is to help us communicate as effectively as possible to as many people as possible in as relevant a way as we can, and engage people.
So there is another survey out there about drop-off centers, just to bring that up and remind the board about that. And that, I think the information will be coming out in the budget presentation, but could you just get us up to speed?
Jim, when were we going to?
This one?
This one, yeah. So that's now.
Oh.
Preliminary
This
results.
is a pretty quick. There's only 3 questions and some comments. So last month at the board meeting, facilities discussed raising more revenue for drop-off center capital expenses and how to do that. And there was some ideas that they presented and the board requested that we ask the drop-off center customers. So that is what we did, and that's what the survey is about.
And this is completely an in-house effort, so this was done by our folks.
So what I just stated, under the objective of why we did the survey, it was only geared towards drop-off center customers. So we had a QR code on a poster, and we had little business cards with the URL and the QR code on it to give to the customers to go to the Survey Monkey and take the survey. We had 3 gift certificates for $100 Visa card as an incentive. And we ran it for 18 days and just closed on Sunday. And the nice thing about in-house surveys and Survey Monkey is we have results. The number of responses we received was 780, and as I said, it's really quick. There was only 3 questions, and then there was open-ended comment opportunity. So we did ask them which drop-off center they primarily used. That would give us this information. The next question was, what do you bring to us? Of these 3 things, trash, recyclables, or food scraps, you can see. And that was done just in case the results seemed kind of quirky. We could cross-reference like, oh, did all the people that bring food scraps to us say, put it on the trash, or that kind of thing. So, but we didn't get quirky results like that. We got some pretty straightforward results. And this is it. This was the question was, here's 4 ways we can raise revenue, and we want you to put them in order of your preference. The first being your highest preference, the last being your least favorite way of raising revenue. And the 4 ways were increasing the trash fees by about $1 a bag, more for bigger bags, a little bit less than $1 for the smallest bag, or charge a facility user fee every time somebody comes and to use the facility, they're charged $1. Or we start charging customers that are bringing food scraps with trash $1. Right now, it's free with trash or no charge with trash. And we only charge customers that don't have trash to drop off food scraps. Or charge every customer that has Blue Bin Recyclables $1. So those were the 4 ways of raising revenue. And this is the raw data, which is a little bit different than the weighted data that I'll show you next. But the raw data, you can see that the option of charging $1 for a facility fee was the most favored. And then it was closely followed by increasing trash fees by $1 per bag. And the others didn't get close to as much support. And then with the weighted, actually the increasing the trash fees just eked up ahead a little bit, and charging $1 for the facility usage was very closely behind. So I would say they're pretty equal with the results in terms of how people think we should raise the revenue for capital expenses. The comments, we received 358. So that's what, about half of the folks that took the survey did provide some comments. 64% was relatively positive. There was I think 140 that said, we really love the staff and what CSW does in the community. They also were positive about the convenience of drop-off centers and the affordability. many respondents indicated their willingness to accept a modest fee increase, and the only concerns that they had were focused more on outcomes, not opposition. So if you're gonna start charging people $1 for food scraps, they're gonna throw it away, and we're really concerned about that. So they're really carrying our mission too. 23% was neutral. Responses were largely in that category of we're really concerned about the outcome of or behavior impacts. Again, if you're charging for food scraps or recycling, some of this is gonna end up in the trash, it's gonna reduce diversion, it's gonna increase trash disposal to illegal dumping. And then 13% was just in direct opposition of any fee increases. Concerns were around fixed income, rising costs of living, and recent fee increases on the trash per bag fee. And that is it.
I'm impressed with the number of respondents. I
Yeah,
think that's really
yeah.
great.
It was a really, really great experiment of just get it out to, I mean, I think like 2 or 3 years ago, we had some of the outreach folks go to drop-off centers to ask them some questions. It's very labor intensive. And we're just like, let's put this URL code, the QR code, and just ask customers to take the survey.
We really have to thank our drop-off center operators because they were all in support of getting this out and talking to their customers. And you know, that really shows, and obviously a couple of the drop-off centers did a super good job because there was high representation from Heinsberg. So we know that the Heinsberg operators did an extraordinary job talking with their customers. So I want to make sure we're recognizing our folks.
Maybe we should rename the title of a drop-off center operator to a drop-off center consultant.
Exactly. I mean,
There's
they-
an element of serious that we're here to help.
Yeah.
Manage your trash.
Jen, could you exit out of the share? So it was very interesting, you know, we were kind of surprised to see that kind of a neck and neck, you know, between the facility fee and a modest increase to bag fees. So this is all to kind of inform conversation, inform decisions. We will again take a look at the comments as well. Those will help inform. And we'll be bringing a recommendation to the finance committee when we bring back the revised budget as well.
Great, thank you very much for the presentations on both surveys.
And we appreciated the opportunity and the feedback from the finance committee and the board to do that. And so thank you for kind of, you know, giving us a little nudge. I think it was really well worthwhile.
The next item on the agenda was an executive session put there on the contingency basis if we needed to. I see no need for us to have an executive session tonight. So we'll move on to item number 7, other business. Is there any other business to bring before the board?
I just want to mention one thing and regarding the new MRF expenses and all. So staff, John and Tony and folks in the finance committee, as part of the bi-weekly warrants, have a table that lists all the expenses from the beginning of the MRF to the current day. And so it's a nice little, you can see, okay, what we've already spent on this. And, you know, it lists kind of like who the contractor was and things like that. So if anyone's interested, you could request a copy of the latest warrant. It would tell you, you know, give you that kind of information. So just mention that.
Thank you for pointing it out.
Thank you, yeah.
Again, reinforcement that a lot goes on at the finance committee and other meetings that we have. If there's no other business then before the board tonight, I think we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
So move, South Burlington.
Second, Essex Junction.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. We are
I'm in
adjourned.
favor.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Paul, what time is?